Welcome to the Suds, Snacks, and Socialism Virtual Forum. Today's topic is building an independent campaign to put the public in public education. Yes. Our speaker today is Marco Amaral, who is running for Superintendent of Public Instruction in the June 7th, 2022 election. This forum series is a cooperative effort of the Alameda County Peace and Freedom Party, Bay Area System Change, Not Climate Change, and the Oakland Greens. I'm Marcia Fineland, and I'm the moderator today. We'll be starting with an initial presentation by Marco Amaral. We will then hear from some teachers who will make some comments and ask some questions, and then go back to Marco. Following that, it will be your turn to ask questions and make statements. Please find the chat and participant and icons at the bottom of your screen. You can signify that you want to be on the stack by typing stack in the chat or by using the hand raising feature under reactions, which is actually the best way to do it. We welcome your various political opinions. We do not allow personal attacks on individuals. Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce Marco Amaral and to support his campaign. He's a special education teacher in San Diego and a school board trustee for the South Bay Union School District. Marco made the trip from San Diego to the Bay Area after his teaching day on Friday and attended events opposing the planned closure of 15 schools in Oakland. I saw him today at Prescott School in West Oakland, where there was a wonderful community demonstration. We didn't see the incumbent candidate, Tony Thurmond, who's a Bay Area resident there. Marco Amaral is passionate not only about equal access to quality education, but also for working toward a just and equitable political, social, and economic system for all. Take it away, Marco.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. Thank you, Marcia. I first wanted to reiterate how thankful I am to the Oakland Green Party, to the Peace and Freedom Party, and to the collective System Change, Not Climate Change. Very, very appreciative for hosting our campaign today. And I also wanted to recognize that this live right here is coming from Ohlone land, occupied Ohlone land, and that our campaign is very much in support of indigenous movements throughout California and internationally as well. Part of our 10-point platform speaks to that, acknowledging that land recognition isn't enough. We need material systemic change for our indigenous communities. My name is Marco Amaral, and I'm running for California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. As stated, I'm a special education teacher. In fact, I'm the first working teacher in state history to run for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. I'm a PhD student in education. I've been an activist within the public education movement since my time at UC Berkeley from 2009 to 2013. And I'm school board president for the South Bay Union School District, where, among other things, the South Bay Union School District became the second K-8 school district in California to implement an ethnic studies curriculum. We were the first K-8 school district in San Diego County to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day. And we have been at the forefront in San Diego County in regards to the movement towards an equitable and just salary for working class educators. That includes our classified and our teachers as well. We have a 10-point platform that seeks to transform public education. This 10-point platform is a recognition really of the decades of social movements that have been fighting for these ideals, for these goals, like I mentioned, for decades. There's nothing in of itself nuanced about our demands, about our 10-point platform. What is nuanced is that these 10 points are now in an electoral campaign. And we are proud to put up these 10 points in recognition of the years of efforts of grassroots mobilizers throughout California and the country as a whole. Our campaign slogan is putting the public back into public education, because it's time that we recognize that public education, the onslaught of attacks on public education, has come from a larger neoliberal capitalist apparatus, an apparatus that is very much supported by our two-party system. California is majority Democrat. We have the majority, and yet, as Marcia mentioned earlier, this California Democratic majority government is about to close down 12 schools in the Oakland Unified School District, one in another school district here in the Bay Area, San Bruno District as well. And so what we see is that continuously, both parties, regardless of how they choose to reform, both parties are part of the same problem, which is the privatization of public education. We are proud to be the only educator-led, working-class, independent, leftist campaign for public education in the state. I wanted to once again thank very much the three collectives and organizations that are hosting us today. I look forward to your questions. I'm excited about the conversation that will ensue in the next couple hours. Thank you so really much. I agree, Norma, not really public. That's why we are here to put the public back into public education, to truly make it public. But please, I welcome questions. I'm more than happy to talk about my my platform. Marcia, tell me what to do next.
Okay, so now we're going to go to some of the teachers who signed up, and because the teachers are out there demonstrating against school closures today, I don't see the local teachers that have been invited, but I do see Aaron Revoluce, who is a teacher.
Bill Balderston has his hand up.
Oh, is Bill Balderston here? Okay, so we're going to have Bill Balderston, we're going to have Aaron, and then we're going to have Bill. So we have Aaron from Los Angeles. Aaron Revoluce is a teacher in Los Angeles and a member of the Peace and Freedom Party Communications Committee. And he's going to either have time to make a statement or ask questions.
I was going to ask some questions. So, hi, how you doing, Marco? Like Smarsha said, I'm Aaron Revoluce. I'm actually a new teacher to LAUSD. I was teaching in Texas. I'm originally from from Los Angeles, but I came back home, and I was really excited to see your campaign launching a few months ago. And when I was reading your bio, I almost felt like I was reading my own bio. I mean, like Chicano from a working class neighborhood, going to UC and becoming a teacher. I was like, is this me in an alternate universe? But I'm very excited to see someone that has shared like the same struggle as me, and who's actually a teacher running to be in a position that's going to impact teachers. And one of my first questions I had was, despite the superintendent of the state being such a big position, I feel like not many people know about it. I did not know about it until you launched your run. What kind of powers is offered to that position that would allow you to make change throughout the state?
Great question. Great question. So look, I agree with you, Aaron. People do not know about this position, and yet it is the most influential position within the realm of public education at the state level. The role of the superintendent is the bully pulpit of public education. That is the official role under the Constitution. Now, different governors and different epochs during California's history have designated the superintendent for certain roles, and over time, those powers have shifted, to different capacities. But overall, what has not changed and what continues to be true is that the superintendent is the quote unquote official voice of public education at the state level. And the role of the superintendent, first and foremost, is to advocate for what is best for public education. that's within the California legislature, that is with the governor of the state, that is at the national level, but what is missing is at the local level. It's no coincidence to me that you don't know, or you didn't know who the main leader of your work sector is. That's not a coincidence. And so I'm going to use the words of the great philosophizer Justin Timberlake. We're trying to bring sexy back to education. No, really, wait, we're trying. This is not, and for lack of a better term, this is not a sexy position. Lots of people ask me, I'm the only independently elected leftist in San Diego County. We ran against 7 Democrats and we won. And you know, lots of people were saying, hey, run for mayor or run for city council or Congress, assembly, one of these more sexy positions. And my fiance was actually the one to tell me, you're not going to run for any of that, because to do that is to be antithetical to what this campaign is about. Like, we're trying to be real with what we actually know, what we are content experts in. And she told me, she's like, you need to run for state superintendent. You need to stay within education, because you have always been about education. From my time at Berkeley, joining the public education movements, to my time as a scholar, teacher. Before being a teacher, I was an instructional assistant. So that's why there's such a strong emphasis as well on classified workers as well, not just on certificated. And as my time as an activist within education in San Diego. And so the superintendent position also appoints to different committees, important people. They have a seat at the UC Regents, for example, as well. The superintendent is in every major public education state committee, and or appoints somebody to those state committees. And so in essence, the position implies a voice in every realm of public education. But what we are seeing right now, what distinguishes us, is our political independence. I tell people all the time, I campaigned for Superintendent Thurman. I voted for Superintendent Thurman. In my heart of hearts, I know some people do disagree with me, but I, in my heart of hearts, actually do believe that Superintendent Thurman is a good person with good intentions. But what distinguishes us is that we have the political liberty and the principled politics in order to stand up to the politics of neoliberalism, to stand up to Governor Newsom when he does something that's antithetical to public education, and to wield the resources and the mobilization efforts of the state of California, the most important state in this country, the #1 economy in this country, to wield that power to do what's best for public education at the national level. I hope I answered your question, Aaron. And if I didn't, please, tell me where I can fill it.
Thank you, Marco. So
Yeah,
we're
that was
going,
great.
So we're going to move on to Bill Balderston now, but Aaron, if you have more questions, we'll take them later when we take more questions, okay? So Bill, do you have a statement or a question? Oh, Bill, I forgot, I'm going to introduce you. Bill Balderston is currently teaching in Alameda after a long career in Oakland Public Schools. He also served as a delegate to the California Teacher Association State Council from his Oakland district. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Marcia. And it's been a busy day. I know Marco has been part of that. We had quite a large turnout at Prescott School this morning, and impressive. It's a school, by the way, that has a long, that is 150-year history rooted in West Oakland, the traditional base of the African-American community here. And yet it's on the chopping block. But from there, I went to an action around the possibilities of war in Ukraine. And you'd say, well, that's sort of a contrast, but there's a commonality here. That is that those people in power, both parties, but especially the Democrats in terms of education, do not want to prioritize the needs of working people. My union, the Oakland Education Association, has been obviously under siege, not only in terms of the struggles around COVID safety, but now in terms of the school closures, and I would say linked at the hip, the possibility of a state takeover. And this is where this campaign can be very critical. As Marco pointed out, somewhat in the distant past, there have been a number of people who were overtly neoliberal deformers in terms of education. But in the previous two state superintendents, they campaigned against these politics, Torlakson and now Thurman. And yet we see what the end result is, that they are following, the party line, if you will. Yeah. I spoke to the head of our political involvement committee, somebody who knows Tony Thurman personally quite well and has supported him in the past, and the Richmond Progressive Alliance and other things, and said to me that he is so distressed and frustrated with what Tony is doing. And I think this is an opportunity to point out that whatever people say in their campaigns, and or even their attitudes towards social justice issues, that doesn't necessarily translate into defending the needs of working people. I have a long history in terms of working on the school finances of the state. I would just say here that, I think people have to remember that the public schools are adjuncts of the state. And it doesn't minimize the need to put pressure on the local school boards by any means. I was out at a rally at one of the school board members' homes this week. But what we have to say is that we have to not only hold the county accountable, and the election for the county superintendent is up in June, and we'll be fighting on that. But we have to hold the people at the state level, Tony Thurman and the governor, Newsom, responsible for this. They are not just, looking from a distance. They have direct, if not control, and then I think they do have direct control, but at the very least, they have given their agreement to move ahead on these. And this is why this is such a critical campaign. I spoke to our OEA president also today about Marco. And I think that we can really fight an important battle on this. Thanks.
Okay, Marco, do you want to respond or?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there was a question in there, but I agree, Bill, with all your points. Yeah, the superintendent of public instruction has a direct say in what's happening in Oakland right now. They have the person that is the superintendent has the ability to either agree with the recommendations of the county superintendent or to disagree with the recommendations of the county superintendent. Superintendent Thurman has stated that he agrees, having the opportunity to disagree with it. If Superintendent Thurman would have disagreed with the recommendations of FICMAT and the county superintendent, we wouldn't be in the position we are in right now. It's as simple as that. And so why is that? I don't want to believe that it's because Tony Thurman, I don't want to believe that's because he agrees that these 12 schools should be closed. I don't want to believe that. I want to believe, though, and actually I feel like what is true is that he does not have, I return back to this point, he does not have the political liberty to do what is right. He is constrained by certain political pressures that are structural that we are not confined to. And so I do want to emphasize that point. There was another point that Bill stated that I wanted to touch on. I can't quite remember at this point. I'm sure it'll come back very quickly. I see that there's other hands up. I'd love to continue talking about our platform and answering questions. I do remember. And it's just he did mention that I was at Prescott Elementary School earlier today. And I do want to say just real quickly a historical point about Prescott Elementary School. I know Bill has stated briefly that Prescott represents a lot to the Oakland community, particularly the Oakland Black community, and its historical significance. Prescott Elementary is actually home to Ida Lewis Jackson. Ida Lewis Jackson was the first credentialed Black teacher in Oakland. And here we are. Look, I think in my classroom, and I think in every classroom, Black History Month should be every single day, just like it is White History Month every single day. But it is important to state in this moment of Black History Month that in the midst of all this, it is Black communities and brown communities and historically important schools to those communities that are first on the chopping block. And that is simply a continuation and a perpetuation of what has occurred, not just over the past 4 years, over the past 50 years, since the end of affirmative action in particular.
Thank you, Marco. It's now time for the Q&A. It's your participant time. Please find the chat and reactions icons. Actually, reactions works best at the bottom of your screen. I see a couple of hands already, and I will call on you. You could signify that you want to be on the stack by typing stack in the chat or by using the hand raising feature, which is the best way to get my attention. We welcome your various political opinions. We do not allow personal attacks on individuals. So I will call on, I'm going to take 3 at a time and then take answers. So the first 3 are Michael Rubin, C.T. Weber, and Vicente Cruz. And then I'll take more. I see more people also. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. I just want to say, before I ask my question, I wanted to make a comment about yesterday. I was at the rally at City Hall in Oakland yesterday. There were hundreds of people, and there was a very good representation of labor speakers. This is new in a sense. We've had many battles in Oakland, but this was the most the broadest representation of the labor movement supporting our call for stopping the closures, and I think that that's important. What I really want to ask about is FCMAT. I think people don't understand FCMAT. I think that people need to become aware of what FCMAT does. In Oakland, the current round of battle is about the fact that the Board of Education in Oakland, they decided not to, they passed a motion against all future school closures, and not 2 weeks passed, and FCMAT then demanded concessions, monetary concessions, as a way of pressuring the school board. And unfortunately, the majority of the school board capitulated. And that's the situation that we're in. But I don't think, I'm interested in what you think that the superintendent of public instruction can do about FCMAT. Over.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. First and foremost, I want to say that I'm part of the Fire FICMAT coalition group, working group that is being organized and spearheaded by Nirali. I forget her last name and I apologize for that. But she's from here, from Oakland,
Yeah.
and leading that that struggle. My particular involvement in that is in attempting to garner support among other school board members throughout the state, and recognizing the inefficiency and how FICMAT perpetuates the privatization of education, and therefore should be either A, democratized, or B, abolished altogether. So what can the superintendent of public instruction do with regards to FICMAT? It can do, Michael, what it can do with anything, and which is to advocate for a certain political line. And I'm very clear what my line is, which is that FICMAT from Oakland to Compton to San Bruno and many places in between and outside of that has served as an agent of the privatization movement.
Yeah.
That's from a historical perspective. And B, it actually does, in its role of fiscal management, a pretty lousy job. Like in of itself, it is pretty inefficient. You know, Oakland was taken over in 2003. Oakland Unified was taken over in 2003. So therefore, if Oakland is in a fiscal crisis, which it's not, but let's just assume that it is for a second, for the sake of argument, then who's at fault? It's the people that are taking over, right? Like the people that took over the school are the ones at fault, not the voters, not the school board, even if many members of the school board are not helping, right? The people that are at fault for the perceived fiscal crisis of Oakland is FICMAT, is the state. And so that's just one example of many as to how FICMAT actually does a pretty bad job. At Sweetwater Union High School District down in San Diego, there was a huge huge fraud crisis that occurred at Sweetwater, where Sweetwater overnight essentially was missing $40 million. FICMAT did a pretty lousy job at addressing who was responsible for that loss. Like occurs very frequently in our political structure, many people, because of their attachment to the status quo, to the power structures that be, many people were set free, and just many people were not accountable to their actions. So in essence, FICMAT not only leads to the privatization of public education, FICMAT also does a pretty lousy job at what it's supposed to be there for, which is fiscal responsibility of public schools. So on those grounds alone, but many more arguments there are surely, on those principles alone, FICMAT either needs to be democratized. And what does that mean? It is laughable, but also just a representative of the sad state of affairs that on the board of FICMAT are only district and county superintendents. So people that are not even in the classroom, people that are the most furthest away from our children, are the ones that are advising on what to do for the people that are in the classroom. So we need to make sure that if the consensus is that, hey, no, we shouldn't abolish FICMAT, which isn't particularly my stance. However, my experience has always been working in coalitions and working as a collective, right? And it's not just about what Marco wants, right? But I do push for my political line, which is a leftist, conscientious, decolonial line, anti-colonial line. And so if we believe that FICMAT should be reformed in that way, okay, well then it should have teacher representation on there. It should have classified representation on there. And it should be accountable to voters as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marco. I had Marco answer that question because I thought it was really, they're all important, but that one was kind of crucial. I'm going to try to go back to calling a few people at a time. So the next one is C.T. Weber. Go ahead, CT.
Mute.
Mute.
Did I get it? Okay, good afternoon, Marco. I wanted to start off by thanking you for running. I think it's an important office, and I'm glad we've got somebody that we can support that speaks to the issues that we feel important. I've also not been a teacher, but I have been a high school substitute teacher in years, so have a little bit of on the issue. What I wanted to talk about is that Peace and Freedom Party and the Green Party have formed a left unity slate this year. There are 9 statewide candidates, and Peace and Freedom Party has endorsed 9. I think Green Party has endorsed 7, and they're going to be considering the other 2 later. If you and the other candidate are endorsed by the Green Party statewide, would you then be joining the unity slate, or would you continue on as sort of an independent candidate endorsed by both parties? Thank you.
I'll let you answer that because it's a real quick answer.
All right.
Putting me against the ropes there. I know, I like it. No, it's a fair question. It's a fair question because my job here is not to abuse and misuse your confidence and trust. I have been a registered NPP since the age of 18. There was a time where I was registered as part of the La Raza Unida party as well, which I'm sure many of you know about. But for the most part of my adult life, I've been registered as an NPP. I believe in what some of my most cherished comrades and friends, compas, are part of the Peace and Freedom, Party for Socialism and Liberation, Green Parties, Green Partiers. And so I am deeply appreciative of that work that you all have done and continue to do. What we are trying to do here, is organize the largest independent leftist grassroots movement for public education in state history, because that's the only thing that's going to be able to beat, it's not about Tony Thurman. It's going to be the Democratic Party. It's us against the whole Democratic Party. So we are also in our ranks, we are also seeking and have sought the endorsement of the Labor Community Independent Party, several DSA factions. We are going to be we are also seeking and in the process of being endorsed by the African People's Socialist Party. That's just to name a few, by Unión del Barrio, many other organizations. And so therefore, we believe, at least this is what my campaign manager tells me to say, we believe that in order for us to have the best chance at winning, which is what we are here to do, we are here to win. It is to coalesce and mobilize a true leftist coalition, electoral coalition. And I want to guarantee you, and I'm telling you this right now, we not only want the support and endorsement of the Green Party of California, the Peace and Freedom Party of California, we want your direct involvement in this campaign. And when we win, in the direct participation of what happens at the California Department of Education. Thank you.
Okay, so the next people on the stack are Vicente Cruz and Dave Kavlicek. Go ahead, Vicente.
Well, Vicente lowered his hand. I don't know if he still wants to talk.
Okay, I apologize if I skipped over you. I had called on you to be after CT before, but I hope you come back, Vicente. Let's go to Dave Kavlicek.
Okay, I have 3 slightly related questions, all of which have at least a little bit to do with higher education rather than just K-12. One is, what do you think of the master plan for higher education that's been around since, I forget whether it's the 50s or the 60s, about the role of UC-CSU and community colleges in California? Do you think more should be done to implement it as it was and never was put out but never really implemented, or that it should be changed, or what? The second is there seems to be a lot of people talking about a mismatch between what students coming out of California high schools are ready to do at colleges and universities and what college and universities want their incoming students to do. Who needs to change? Do colleges need to expect less, or do high schools need to prepare more, or what? And then the last thing is about selective admissions, both to like magnet high schools and various things. The stuff that's been in the news a lot about Lowell in San Francisco, but it applies to like arts and music magnet schools in lots of places. And I'm not sure what other kinds of things at the high school level. And then also obviously to universities, that Berkeley, where you went, is considered much more selective than most of the other public universities in California. What are your thoughts on selective admissions versus, you know, lotteries or whatever? Those are my three questions.
Okay, I realize that's a complicated group of questions, but I need to call on Aaron Revelez, who needs to leave soon and has another question. Go ahead, Aaron. Maybe he's already gone. I will ask Aaron's question. So Aaron.
No, he's there.
He's there. Go ahead, Aaron.
We can't hear you, Aaron.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So studying like education history in California, I realized recently that in 1998, they made it extremely difficult for districts to offer bilingual education, and that this law was barely repealed 6 years ago in 2016. How far do you think California has come since then in instituting bilingual and dual language education? And how much more ground do you think we still need to cover to fully implement dual language and bilingual education across the state?
Oh, this is one of my meat and butter issues right here, bread and butter issues. This is my main cheese. Aside from special education, dual language is something that I'm very much interested in on different fronts. Yes, what you are referencing is Proposition 227, and then the transition into Proposition 58. Our campaign believes that every student in California should have the right to learn more than one language throughout the course of their education or career. As it is, Proposition 58, what replaced 227, didn't actually do away with the systemic racism of Proposition 227. What we are seeing throughout the state is the systemic gentrification and commodification of dual language. Our California Department of Education will make sure that dual language is not only fully funded, but implemented in the communities it was primarily meant to help. Let me tell you a quick contradiction of Proposition 58. Proposition 58 tells communities that don't have English as their first language, that they have the right to demand a dual language program in the language of their choosing if they meet a certain threshold of signatures, that is. Proposition 58 is that they have the right to demand a dual language program of their choosing at their local public school. The problem is that Proposition 58, as we call in the business, is an unfunded mandate. We do not fund it, right? So then what happens is that public schools need to take out of their already weakened and slim general fund in order to fund this mandate, right? And then that takes away from other students, right? And so what we see even in the microcosms of school districts is this very capitalistic way of viewing the fund, the general fund, which means everybody, and especially every marginalized community, is fighting for every penny. the Department of Education will aim as well. We not only believe in the fully funding of Proposition 58, so that therefore it can this mandate can be completed, right? We believe in the amendment of the California Constitution, and to read as follows. And this is directly from the Constitution of the progressive state of Montana. The Montana Constitution says, and I'll fix it so that it fits into California. The state recognizes the distinct and unique cultural heritage of Californian indigenous communities and nations, and is committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural integrity. If Montana can do that, we certainly can do that in a democratic controlled state. What does this mean? Not only do our students have the right to learn Mandarin, Spanish, Tagalog, right? Just to name a few of the dominant second languages of the state, they also have a right to learn, and we owe it to our indigenous siblings, the indigenous languages of this state. And in addition to that, for example, here in Oakland, there is a significant Mayan community. In Los Angeles, where you're at, there's a significant Mixteco community and Zapoteco community. Those students too merit the right to hold on and to revitalize their cultural integrity, their cultural roots. And ultimately, this comes to what the essence of public education is all about. Dual language is more than just about learning languages. That in of itself is important, but what it's really about, it's about creating stronger binds and connections between us as human beings. That is what public education is about. It is about knowing one another and demystifying and deconstructing otherness. Thank you.
You want to answer Dave?
Yeah, I'll answer the previous questions. Was that Aaron?
Yes, that's good. And you did bring up a good point. I do remember reading news articles recently about a crisis, and especially in hospitals, of not having translators for indigenous people coming over from Mexico. So I think if you were able to do what you wanted to do, it would definitely help that crisis.
Right. No, definitely. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'll answer the other questions, the set of 3 questions. So I think the first one was essentially, do colleges need to change or do high schools need to change to meet let's call them the needs of our time? I was actually listening to a podcast, a couple of podcasts regarding this exact issue. It's something that I've been contemplating for years as well, especially as a graduate of Berkeley. I would have wanted to, in Marco's perfect world of education, I would have wanted to major in political science, in international relations, and minor in automotive repair. And this is the thing. We need to understand that the central idea of a university is to learn about the universal. And so that is what the university is about. And I was listening to a Spanish song from Chile, from a singer. Her name's called Violeta Parra, and the name of that song is Que Viva los Estudiantes, long live the students. And the song really is so different about the role of students than what we have here in the United States. In that song, it speaks about education and the role of students as having this interconnected bind with the working class. And what we've created here in the United States is, and it perpetuates in education, in public education, is this system of haves and have-nots. So it completely makes sense that the working class at some level, at many levels, in fact, feel not only disattached, but feel in many ways angry at the upper educated class, right? At people like me, because what we have created is this system of elite, educated, folk that have no connection to working class struggles, and the working class, which is barely surviving and holding on by a thread, and they politically need somebody to blame, right? And so who better to pit these two against by a generation of indebted students that, yes, are many of them are snobby, right? And are disattached from the needs of the working class, and poor people, right? And so for me, I believe that both need to change. And it goes into your other question about, essentially, I think it was about, is tracking correct? In Germany, they have a tracking system. And essentially, at the age of 13, right, you get a whole host of assessments. And it's not standardized tests, right? It's really different types of assessments. And essentially, they then track you to your future careers, right? Potential future careers. Tracking in this country has a very racist and classist history to it because of the dynamics of how this country was developed. But in of itself, just the idea itself of tracking students, right? Given that we don't limit them if they want to branch out to something else in the future, that in of itself isn't a bad idea. But the problem here is that if we track a student in high school or in middle school to become a mechanic, the problem is that we're tracking them into an ununionized mechanic field. Whereas in Germany, right, all the BMW workers, right, all the Mercedes workers, they have really strong trade unions. We don't, right? So tracking in our current system, it has a whole set and host of problems. And so if we were to change the high school, right, in order to track students into certain careers, right, you have, you're going to be a mechanic, but we need to guarantee that you're going to get paid well, right? A unionized mechanic in Massachusetts might make $120,000 a year. In Arizona, they might make $30,000 a year, right? So we need to make sure that if we are to implement a future system of tracking, that it does take into account these very important trends of racism and classism when it comes to that. At the university level, we need to really get off our high horse. The first thing that I did when I was a student at UC Berkeley, the very first thing on the very first day was that I went to apply to a custodian position in the dining commons. My first friends at UC Berkeley at the age of 18 were not students; they were workers. In fact, I'm being hosted by one of them this weekend. I'm staying at their place, and so the university needs to change in the sense that kids and young adults can go to the university and they can study how to be a plumber at the university and also take a course on Beowulf, right? And these things should not be separate. These ideas should not be, they should be together as one thing. They should, and so I think that's my stance on that. And then the other question was about the California Master Plan. Higher public education, public universities must be tuition free, period. They must be tuition free. And how do we do this? One of the first things that we need to do in order to make them tuition free is to democratize the UC regents, is to democratize the CSU trustees. What does that mean? That means that students and workers in particular, they are the ones that elect their UC regents, not one person, which is the governor, that has almost unanimous power as to who gets to control higher ed public education. That's just antithetical to a democracy. and it's a stark contradiction of this supposed public education system. So in order for us to begin the road of making the UC not just affordable, but tuition free, we need to make sure that it's working class people and people directly in the trenches of education that are making these decisions, not disconnected millionaires and career politicians. Thank you. I hope I answered your questions.
Okay, thank you, Marco. So I just can't help but cut in here because Karl Marx would agree with you about plumbing and Beowulf. And actually about bilingual education. You know, I was a teacher in a district that didn't have bilingual education, so I had 9 different languages in my class. But in order to get a certificate to do that, I had to take a class on how to do that. And what they taught me was the only way to teach children their new language is to let them learn their old language, their home language well. In other words, you have to learn your concepts in the language that your family speaks, that you're used to, that you converse in every day. And then you gradually transition children into also learning the new language, but you cannot just throw them in there. And Lenin said that even if there is one child who speaks another language, you have to teach them in that language.
That's right.
So this is not a new idea. So anyway, the next 3 people are Millie Phillips, Norma Harrison, and Bill Balderston. So go ahead, Millie.
Hi, thank you, Marcia. Just wanted to say I'm active in the labor and community for an independent party, and I put a link into the chat for the forum that we're co-sponsoring for Marco Amaral tomorrow. So I hope people can also attend that forum. And just for anyone who doesn't know, we're not actually a party. We're a network of activists, relatively small, but national in scope at this point. We're encouraging people to run as independent candidates and to not run as Democrats, and to make sure that people who have the kind of ideas that Marco has been talking about don't make the mistake that Tony Thurman made in a sense of being sucked up into the Democratic Party machinery. So that was my comment. My question here is, how do you see, Marco, your campaign as fitting into kind of a national trend that I'm starting to see across the country of other people wanting to run independent campaigns and to form local parties and other activities, you know, that would lead to potentially a working class party, but it certainly would lead to people like yourself becoming elected and being able to do something. How do you see your campaign as fitting into that nationally or statewide?
Yeah, before I answer your question, I just wanted to also, can y'all hear me? Good. I just wanted to also remind Marcia that I don't know if Vicente wanted to get back onto the stack or not, but I do remember you know, him trying to ask a question earlier. To answer your question, Millie, the chickens have come home to roost, and I'm proud to be one of those chickens. But I ain't no chicken either. And so, yeah, we're living through a very, very special political moment in this country, where people are seeing that the Biden administration, for example, when it comes to issues around COVID and immigration, as just another example, is doing the same as what Trump did policy-wise, if not in many cases, even going a step further than what Trump did. And they are analyzing for themselves and coming up with the same conclusion that we have all come up here as well, that something in this system is broken, and they are looking towards campaigns like, not just like this one, like many other ones, in order to legitimize their very real frustrations. And so for this campaign, we acknowledge that. It's one of the reasons why we felt comfortable running as an independent. I mean, I would never run as anything other than that, but trust me, it is scary to run a statewide campaign in a state like California. And yeah, and so the only reason we can't do that is because we acknowledge, Millie, the same thing that you're seeing, right? That there is this growing trend, even within the Democratic Party. You know, I posted something on my personal Facebook the other day where it was, and I have received over 24 messages just like this one, okay? And the message read, and I'm paraphrasing, hey man, I support your campaign completely. Due to undemocratic Democratic Party bylaws, I'm not allowed to publicly endorse your campaign. And you have inspired me to leave the Democratic Party, right? And so once their term is up, right? They're leaving the Democratic Party for good, right? And I have received over 24 messages, almost exactly similar to that, right? And I don't necessarily attribute that to just our campaign. This specific message did attribute it to our campaign. However, it's really a long time coming. We are on the shoulders of giants before us that have sacrificed so much politically, their own emotional states and material states in order for us to be here doing this before you today.
Okay, next is Norma. Go ahead, Norma.
Didn't she go before?
No.
We can hear you, Norma. No, I guess we can't. I think your mic is having problems, Norma.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Okay,
Oh, I know.
there she goes.
There.
Hello, can you hear me?
Barely.
Okay, barely? Really? All right, well, let's see if,
I can hear you, Norma.
I need everybody. I've been running for Board of Education in Berkeley for the past 8 years or more. The idea is that we could teach plumbing to a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old and a 20-year-old. We could teach it to people being together. Oh, crud. The host is interrupting me. We could teach that, or auto repair, or poetry, or language. We could teach each other regardless of age. The idea of segregating people by age is a very colonialist structure that we are bound to, and we don't think outside that confinement. And that's my point when I'm a candidate. First of all, I announce that I'm a communist, and that gets people, well, I don't know. Maybe it offends and frightens people, but we need to be living together. Old people, young people, people however they are. We need to get rid of the idea of the 8-hour day. We need to get rid of the idea that labor intensive is a bad thing. Somebody said, well, what about the children? They want to have them there. You know, they'll learn, they'll respond according to their control instead of the doctrinaire. World Health, and ended up doing work. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Can you repeat the question, Norma, please?
I didn't quite hear you. I should put the earphones back in so I can hear you.
Can you please repeat your question? It's not working, Norma, on my end.
We can't hear you, Norma.
What do you think about people living integrated instead of segregated the way we are now? Segregated by age. Does that help?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. That's a great material question. I think right now it's like in the realm of a philosophical question. I agree with you. I agree with you on and I've seen this happen. I've seen this actually materialize. I studied for 4 months. I did a pretty important research study in Bolivia for 4 months, and Bolivia is one of the only national decolonial projects in the world. First started by Evo Morales. Unfortunately, there was a coup 2.5 years ago, but it seems that the indigenous leftist coalition has reclaimed power in Bolivia, which is great. So what you are talking about, I have seen it in happen in real life, right? So it's not just a philosophical idea, right? It's not just, something that's in the clouds. It can occur. It can happen. So for me, I want schools. I would like schools and communities to have more autonomy and self-determination. Okay. And yes, I do believe that at some level, right, there needs to be a sort of more there needs to be of a more significant influence at the state level, right? But when it comes to ideology and whatnot, and that's why I'm running. But I believe that the true essence of a community school, right, is that the workers own the means of production, right, in that school, in that community, right? And so I believe that there is what I would be pushing for. That's what I would be pushing for is one thing, which is a more integrated, based on age, right? A more integrated society and more integrated education system, like the one you stated, right? Because I've seen it happen, because I've seen the beauty of it, the good outcomes from it. And another thing is what communities choose for themselves to do, right? And what particular schools, right, see best fit for themselves, right? There's two parts to this equation, right? However, Marco Amaral, do agree with you, Norma, in that classrooms, right, and school structures should be more integrated.
Okay, thanks, Marco. Now we will go to
Can I
Bill
make this
Balderston.
Can I make this?
No, Norma, it's not your
last
turn.
Comment to it, what he just said, is that we need to teach that to our communities. We don't need to keep it secret as we campaign for office.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Marcia. First, let me say that just as a very side note, that if people are interested in recent developments in Bolivia, I encourage people to go to International Viewpoint. There's a very good article on the RSA government and the struggles that are going on there. My main points are threefold here. One is about independent politics. I think this is a critical time as the kind of polarization in this country is getting more and more extreme, even if it's not manifested so clearly in California. And I have to say, I'm very excited about Marco's campaign. And I think it has the potential not only to raise the issues around education, but around the contradictions, let's put it nicely, that the Democratic Party faces. As a personal note, I will say that I was on the ticket that was the last sort of November election for the Green Party and Peace and Freedom, and for insurance commissioner. And between the two of us, I got around over 220,000, and the Peace and Freedom candidate got slightly more. We had about 6% of the vote, and I think now we have a unity slate that will move that forward. So I think that's a great step forward. Number two, on money, there's a lot that could be said. The money is there. We know that. There's a record surplus. For better or worse, Prop 98 guarantees the kind of monies that would at least deal in the short to medium term with what districts like Oakland are facing. And we know, of course, that we need to expand that base in terms of corporate taxation. We tried with Prop 15 recently, but we need to keep trying. But it relates to the third point, which is, for all our talk about resources, which are critical, we also have to talk about the ideological struggle that's going on now. Certainly language diversity is part of that. And I point out that, for example, one of the largest language groupings here in the East Bay are Arabic, especially Yemeni. So we're not simply talking about the Americas, we're talking about a range of people. And the fight has to be for control over curriculum, even while understanding that all the stakeholders need an input. We're fighting now, for example, around funding, which is always critical, for climate justice curriculum at the state level. But I think what we're seeing now, and we have to put this in the national context, is an assault by the right on just hearing things, discussing things. This is reminiscent of the 1930s in Germany in terms of book burnings. And we have to be fighting for the right of people to hear the full range of ideas in curriculum that are out there. It's a very, very frightening time in terms of what's happening with books being banned, with censorship and so forth. So curriculum is a large part of this discussion. Thanks.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, most definitely. Curriculum is a huge part of this discussion. Let's take the most recent example of the ethnic studies curriculum, which was when high school seniors don't need to fulfill the ethnic studies requirement until 6 years from now. So that's already a slap in the face of the Ethnic Studies Now Coalition's movement for an ethnic studies K-12 curriculum. B, the struggle of our Palestinian siblings and their right to self-determination and their own state has been completely stripped from the California curriculum. That is another slap in the face of not just our Palestinian siblings, but of the movement for ethnic studies, which has been over the years in the struggle, has been deeply supported by our Palestinian siblings. And three, the state just announced that it's illegal for me in my classroom to recite the Luis Valdez poem in Lakesh. And so I'll recite that right now as a protest, but also because it's something that I believe in. In Lakesh, Alakin, you are neither me, yo soy tu otro tú. If I do harm to you, si te hago daño a ti, I do harm to myself, me hago daño a mí mismo. If I love and respect you, si te amo y respeto, I love and respect myself, me amo y respeto a mí mismo. that right there, that phrase, the right attacked it as stating in a lawsuit that it was a religious phrase. Unlike in the Pledge of Allegiance, nowhere in that poem is the word God. Nowhere in that poem, right, is there any reference to a faith of sorts. It is simply a poem of humanity. It is simply a poem inspired in Mayan culture that brings us together, and that simply tells the students that we are here for one another and that we'll get through this class and beyond that together. So this state, again, this Democrat majority state, has completely folded to a very small minority of people that have no interest in listening. They only have an ideological interest in pushing their attacks. And what's worse is that, for example, when it comes to like the CRT, critical race theory debate that it has ensued throughout the state and the country. Unfortunately, many times the people that are defending CRT are liberals that have never taken a CRT class. And so they are really just supporting CRT out of like this vague identity politics, kind of obligation to defend CRT, but they don't actually know what CRT is. And so then when they argue in favor of CRT against the right, they often sound like people like that they don't know what they're talking about. That happens at the state level. That has happened at the California Department of Education. The right is really good at knowing when a liberal doesn't know what they're talking about, and the right, unlike liberals, will actually point out those things and have no shame in doing that. And so then it makes CRT look bad, right? And so what we are proposing, what we are saying is that here is somebody that actually has studied critical race theory for more than 4 years, specifically critical race theory in the intersection of critical disability studies, what is known as DisCrit. And we actually will, our California Department of Education will actually serve as an education vector, as a space where we actually will have these public discussions because we're capable of doing so. And because we have the knowledge base to do so, in order to defend these curriculums that at the end of the day are about one thing. That's just justice, which is what public education should be about. And so we believe that the Democratic Party and its political leaders have proven themselves ineffective to defend these conscientious, liberatory centered practices. And so it's up to the people that actually know what these things are about to defend them. And it's time that we actually step into that role.
Thank you for that, Marco. I'm going to be the first to admit I don't really know what critical race theory is, but I know what history is. And I mean, I taught grades from kindergarten through 5th grade. And as you said before, every month is Black History Month, and we are all part of history, and we need to learn real, to me, it's just teaching real history. So in my classroom where I had all kinds of books, I had books about, my 2nd graders could read books about little children who integrated schools in the South, about little African-American children who were courageous and were part of the civil rights movement. And that's just history. So I think what is being conflated is this fancy term, critical race theory, is being confused with just plain history as it really happened that needs to be shared. I won't say taught because that sounds top down, but shared with our children. What I want to do here is remind people that if you're enjoying talking to Marco today, which I certainly am, we can do it again tomorrow. Millie Phillips posted in the chat the link for the forum tomorrow from 2 to 4, right, Millie? Shake your head, yes. She posted it in the chat at 2:54 p.m. I went and looked for it. So if you want to scroll up and get that link, I encourage you to copy it or do whatever you can to save that link and join us again tomorrow. But we still have time today. I'm looking for hands and not seeing, oh, I see Stan Woods. Go ahead, Stan.
Well, Stan is finding
Yeah.
the mute button.
Yeah,
Oh,
I got it.
I posted Millie's thing.
Okay. Sorry, my name is Stan Woods. I'm one of the organizers of this forum series, though today I was late because I had trouble logging on for some reason. I was at the anti-war demonstration in Oakland against the pending crisis with the Ukraine. And but anyway, that gets me to my point. Maybe you mentioned this in your initial presentation, Marco. For years, there's been debates, starting with the Vietnam War, of military recruiters being allowed in public schools. And there's also been the counter point that if they are allowed, anti-war organizations should be able to have open booths there and so on and so forth. I don't know if that's a current thing in California schools right now. I don't know if there's junior ROTC in high schools right now. I do know in Oakland, for example, very close to me, we have a unusual institution called the American Indian Military School, which is a publicly funded charter school. And guess what? 3% of the students are Native American. So it's a very bizarre institution, but Jerry Brown originally founded it when he was mayor of Oakland. So I wonder what thoughts you have about that, of the military having access to high school students, and if they are allowed access, that anti-war groups be allowed equal access.
Thank you, Stan, for that question. Yeah, we have a really critical stance on our campaign on this question, and we're proud to be the only campaign that is tackling this question. One of our main platform issues on the 10 points is curbing military recruitment in our schools. I'm gonna be honest, and people can, take this piece, right? But that's okay. I believe that the military recruitment should stop, full stop. It should just stop in our schools. However, two of my best friends, my brothers, who I deeply love and have known since the age of 4, they were recruited by the military. They've had mixed outcomes due to that. But I grew up in a poor working class community where the majority of people in that community, the military was their only option. With that being said, this is what we believe. We believe that the California Department of Education will lead a national effort to end Section 9528 of George Bush's 2001 No Child Left Behind bill. This section of law allows our military to have unlimited access to our students. This disproportionately impacts Black, Latinx, Southeast Asian, and poor communities in our schools. Our schools should not be vectors for our nation's imperialism, period. Okay? That is what I believe. And that's what this campaign is pushing towards. And this is the compromise for me. And so it's national law, right, that the military must have unlimited recruitment to our schools. And we are connected with organizations, grassroots organizations like Project Llano, who have for many years been against the recruitment of military, of students being recruited into the military in our schools. But in order for us to do that here at California, we need to wage a campaign at the federal level. And our California Department of Education is ready to do that. And we have a whole host of tactics, from direct action to an ideological campaign by pointing out the contradictions, right? How the federal government continues to tell us that we don't have money for education, yet here we are on the brink of war with the Ukraine. Thank you, Stan.
Okay, I'm going to call on Laura Wells next, followed by Michael Rubin. Go ahead, Laura.
Hi, this this forum has been wonderful, so thank you, Marco. And I have a question about Latino organizations like LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, and things like that. Do you think, has there been any interest? Do you think there will be any interest? What do you think are the possibilities of breaking into those frequently Democratic Party aligned organizations? Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for that question. On Thursday, we were just endorsed by the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, AFL-CIO, Sacramento branch, which is the only Council of Latin American Advancement, AFL-CIO, that has the powers to endorse. So we're very, very proud and excited about that endorsement. We are about to commence outreaching to LULAC as well. But we also acknowledge the politics of LULAC, especially recent politics of LULAC. By recent, I mean the past maybe 2 decades, where it has been very much attached to Democratic Party politics. But also giving them the benefit of the doubt, that's maybe only because there's no other option, right? For them to endorse. So we are outreaching to organizations like LULAC, but like I just mentioned, we are endorsed by the Association of Raza Educators, which has branches in San Diego, Los Angeles, Sacramento, Santa Barbara. I believe that's it. And then also we are seeking the endorsement of Unión del Barrio, which has a branch in San Diego, Los Angeles, the Central Valley as well. And so, yeah, we are seeking the endorsement and have already received the endorsement of these Latino, Latinx organizations and Chicano, Chicanx organizations. We believe that they are super important in order to be successful in this race, given our minority majority status in this race. But with that being said, and this is a very important thing for us, we don't want to fall prey to the same type of identity politics that's being pushed by the Democratic Party, where essentially I go into any brown community, any indigenous Latinx, Chicanx community in California and say, hey, vote for me because I'm brown. Hey, vote for me because I'm a Chicano. Voten por mí porque hablo español, right? Like, that's the type of identity politics that the Democratic Party and liberals want people like me to push. It's a very vague, very mediocre and lazy politics. That's not what we're about. Yes, my identity is very important to me as a Chicano, but my politics is what creates my identity, not the other way around. And so we are pushing for a serious working class, conscientious, multiracial campaign, right? That is organizing all communities. In San Diego in particular, if you were to look at our support in San Diego has, I believe, a population of less than 6% African-American Black population. And yet about 1/3 of our donors from San Diego are Black, and many throughout the state as well. That speaks to what people on the ground where I am from know about what we do, right? And so, and this is really important as well, because what is status quo in California politics is for Latinos to vote for Latinos, right? Is for Black folks to vote for Black folk, right? And then people are just voting based on solely on identity, and there are significant political limitations to that. And we are calling those limitations out. And it's important for us to call those limitations out. Because when we enter the California Department of Education, it's going to take all of us. And yes, the most disenfranchised communities, from people with disabilities to our Black and Indigenous siblings, will be at the forefront of the decision-making power. However, it will take all of us to get to that point. And we need to do it in a cohesive, conscientious, meticulous way. And we believe that our 10-point platform speaks to this wide spectrum of identities and the politics behind these identities as well. That's why we are the only campaign for public education that is pushing for reparations for our Black siblings. It's why we are the only campaign for public education that's calling to an end to school resource officers and an end to the carceral state here in California. We only Texas surpasses us in terms of incarcerated people, right? We spend $16 billion a year. These are issues that both impact, however disproportionately so, but both impact Black and Brown communities, right? And our campaign is making the linkages here, but also giving certain communities the place they deserve with respect to the politics that would materially improve their lives. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Marco. Next we go to, and I think probably last, is Michael Rubin.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the discussion we were having about curriculum and ask a related question about that. I'm interested in your views on the role of the community in the schools. In other words, on the one hand, I don't want these right-wing people to be determining school policy. On the other hand, there is something democratic about the right of parents to have some influence over the schools. But I can't stand these right-wing people who come to school board meetings. And, so I'm curious how you reconcile that and how you speak to that problem in your campaign.
Yeah, thank you, Marcia. I believe that this is a problem of a lack of proper organization of working class poor communities. I believe that those right-wing, whatever you want to call them, activists, these right-wing activists that bombard school boards, I think they're in the very small minority, but they're organized. That's the difference. They are organized. Our side is not organized. And we have nobody at the California Department of Education that has experience with organizing communities. And so I do believe, that workers should have more control over their work environment. I'm a school board member, and let me tell you, and I know that there's at least 2 other school board members on this call, so I don't mean to offend anybody because I'm offending myself if that's the case. I don't believe that the current system of governance that we have over schools is democratic, nor do I think it serves its proper role of doing what's best for students. I believe that schools would be far better suited if the people that directly are in those trenches are the ones making the decisions for themselves and for the students. But with that being said, so I just stated that I believe that workers should have more ownership over their production, right? And our campaign will be pushing for that. But we also need to balance this dynamic of what a community school actually means, right? And so I do believe that schools should have a true democratic council of parents and families and students that actually has real power. And let me talk about, just for example, Let me just talk, for example, about students. If you go to Latin America, right, and many parts of the global South, they don't have student governments. They have student unions with a capital U. This is a huge, huge difference. What we are creating in our schools is glorified resume builders with our ASBs, right? Just these annoying kids, and I was one of those annoying kids, right? So I'm not trying to offend any of my, ASB students, right? But it's just these students that are being indoctrinated to become future CEOs and bosses, right? That objectify and exploit their workers, right? And so what we are saying is that we need to move away from the associate student body, student government model, and to a student union model. A student union where all students are truly taken into consideration, where kids from a very early age are using their schools as centers of democratic power. And so this is where we believe we can find a true balance. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with the right coming to our schools. Look, before it was popular to get attacked by the right, I was being just dragged by them back in 2017. Back in 2016, I've had over 5 videos with thousands of views. You can look them up on YouTube, made against me from the right. I've had people with huge, Nazi symbols and swastikas come to my school board meeting and tell me everything you can imagine to my face. Even though I disagree with them, right? I do not think there's anything inherently wrong with them doing that. The problem is, and I go back to the beginning of what I just stated, is that there is no organized counterbalance to them. And I want to de-emphasize counterbalance because it implies that we're about the same weight, and I don't think that's true. I think if there was an actual organized effort at the state level to organize working class poor communities to improve their own self-interest, we would be on the winning side of those arguments by and large. And so that's what I think about that. I think it's oftentimes Democrats shooting themselves in the foot, which we all know as a party they're really good at doing. And a lot of it is self-sabotage to an extent. In that when you just get elected, right? The work doesn't stop there. That's another thing. Like, I'm a public servant. And so I think lots of elected people, even good intended people, don't understand what it means to, at least from my perspective, what it means to be a public servant. My job does not stop at just making decisions in the confines of what the institution tells me I make decisions in. It goes beyond that. I need to be continuously knocking on doors. I need to be continuously organizing our communities, right? And I need to be continuously advocating for these ideas that will move us forward. And I think what oftentimes happens is that people believe that the campaign ends on the day of the election. And that's not true. You just got 4 more years of campaigning. I hope I answered your question, Michael.
Okay, thanks, Marco. So this has been great. I don't see any more hands. I'm going to take a last call for people who would like to ask a question or just say something like, way to go, Marco. All right, well, I'll
go,
do that.
Marco.
Thank you. I do want to say that, look, y'all, I'm just going to be honest here, right? We are collecting signatures throughout the state of California. we don't know if we're going to get 4,000 signatures, right? But we're acting, we are working as if we're not going to get a single one, right? In the sense that this campaign requires money. Unfortunately, capitalists are in charge of our election system, so we don't have public financing of elections. We should have public financing of elections in any true democracy, right? But we don't have that, and so we need your help. We need to fundraise $4,000 by the 8th of February. In 3 days, we need to fundraise $4,000, and then after that, if we want to have all 250 words on the voter information guide, right, that's another $6,000. So we need by the 16th, $10,000. And so this is the first real test of our campaign with respect to, this is when the fun starts. And so I'm asking if you have the means to donate whatever it is, 15, 25, 50 or more, please do so. There's the link in the chat, and we would greatly appreciate it. And then after you're done donating, pass it along to 5 or 10 friends and see if they can donate $10 or $15 to the only educator-led working class campaign for public education in the state of California. Thank you.
Okay, I see Stan Woods' hand. You can ask your question or say something, Stan.
Yeah, I'll make it real quick. And once again, I apologize, you already mentioned this. I understand you're also an activist and a member of the Teachers Union in San Diego. I don't know if it's affiliated with the NEA or the AFT. Any chance of them endorsing you?
So because this is a statewide election, locals, from what I understand, even though I've been a dues paying member for several years now, and have been a site rep myself for 3 years, locals, when it comes to state elections, have to defer to their state council for state elections. And CTA, back in, I think it was November, okay, undemocratically, without the consent of their rank and file workers, already endorsed Tony Thurman. So even if I wanted my local, my personal union, SEA, Sweetwater Education Association, or the union where I'm a board president of, who also supports us, Southwestern Teachers Association, even if I wanted them to endorse us, I believe are barred from doing so. Again, because we actually don't have democratic structures in place.
Yeah, if I could just supplement that a little bit. When I lived in San Diego, I was a Peace and Freedom Party candidate for Board of Equalization, and the San Diego Central Labor Council endorsed my campaign. But of course, because it went to multi-districts, the other counties did not agree with that. And so it went to the Democratic Party, the final endorsement. So yeah, it's if it goes in other counties, then the local counties lose control.
Let me just add, yes, what Marco said is true, and CTA, and I assume CFT, makes the endorsement, and this obviously is a statewide office, so they have a certain prerogative. That said, and this is what I've talked to people in the OEA about, we can want a very critical analysis, to put it mildly, of Tony Thurman in terms of what he has and hasn't done. And while it may not be an overt endorsement, it also is the opportunity, to critique the decisions of CTA, which we've never been reticent to do.
Okay, I see a couple more hands, but I want to weigh in here as a past union CTA member and candidate for multiple offices. I would say that CTA is totally, doesn't even think about it, endorses Democrats, except occasionally will endorse a Republican just to show that they're nonpartisan. I ran for state senate, I think it was 1998, and there was some kind of local meeting. I wasn't at it, but because it was some rep meeting, my union president from my Alameda Education Association was there. They just said, oh, of course we're endorsing Don Parata for state senate. And she had to stand up and say, wait a minute. We have a unit member running against him, but it didn't go anywhere. It's something we have to change. So, you know, I don't know if Marco knows this, but we have a 5-minute wrap up for you, but I think I have time for the 2 hands, but I'm just going to take those 2. I see Dave Campbell and Dave Kavlicek. Go ahead, Dave C.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly expand a little bit on my earlier comment. Way to go, Marco. And just to say that the kind of politics that you've been expressing throughout this forum are exactly the kind of politics that I joined Peace and Freedom Party for. So I'm hoping to recruit you, and that's all. Bye.
Okay, go ahead, Dave K.
Yeah, I was wondering who your other opponents are besides Tony Thurmond. If I remember correctly, when Tony Thurmond was elected, there was like some big money charter advocate from LA who was the main opponent. Is he running again, or is there some charter advocate in addition to Tony Thurmond and yourself running?
Yeah, no. So as of right now, it's just Superintendent Thurmond and myself. From what I'm aware, as of this morning, it's just us 2. With that being said, we know how the charter school movement or the right. I was surprised I didn't get any questions on charter schools. I believe I have a pretty different answer than what is typical. But with that being said, I'm surprised that they and the right in general have not put up their candidate. But we also know that it could be the 7th, right, of February. It can be the 23rd hour, and they have the money in order to put someone in there at the last minute. So we're going to be, keeping an eye on that. But as of right now, yeah, it's just Superintendent Thurmond and myself.
Yeah, I believe there is more time. There's a nomination period also. But anyway, so Marco, you have another 5 minutes or so if you'd like to talk about anything you want.
Thank you.
Charter
So feel free to email me, text me. My phone number is readily available. I'll put it in the chat right now before I forget. There it is. Please text me, email me, call me. Text me first because I tend to not answer phone numbers I'm not aware of, as I'm sure many of you are as well. We're all good leftists are a little bit paranoid. So everybody, there's a reason why our campaign phrase is putting the public back into public education. Let me quickly go through some of the points in our 10-point platform that were not discussed, at least not discussed in a concrete way during this beautiful discussion.
Are you going to tell us about charter schools that you think?
No, I will though, if you want at the end. I'll do that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, for sure. I'll definitely do that. Thank you, Norma. First and foremost, education workers must be respected. And what this means is that just like the salaries of state politicians are codified into law, the salaries of education workers must also be codified into law in order so that education workers can know that they are being guaranteed not just a living wage, but a thriving wage. What that means for us is a $70,000 minimum salary for incoming teachers, which is the compromise, because we believe that's still low, right? So that is the compromise. That is the period. And a $25 an hour minimum wage for our classified employees. That's our custodians, bus drivers, kitchen staff, paraprofessionals, etc. It is demeaning and outright criminal that we still have classified workers barely making $15 an hour, and when they are serving our most vulnerable children. So that's one. Education workers must be respected. We need to close this, end the school to prison pipeline, not by implementing superficial reforms, but by directly going to the root of attacking the carceral state here in California, and also ending school resource officers. Our California Department of Education will be in support of grassroots movements against school resource officers, like what is happening in Los Angeles. We need to not only respect ethnic studies and the movement of ethnic studies towards a liberated ethnic studies curriculum, we need to go a step forward and a step further and make sure that the California Department of Education is working with leading scholars in gender, women, and queer studies, activists in gender, women, and queer issues, and community members in order to implement a gender and women studies and queer studies curriculum in our schools. This country was not only created via the enslavement of African people, but through the genocide of indigenous people, through the politics of white supremacy, but also through the politics of patriarchy, through the politics of misogyny as well. And so it is important that we also recognize that in our school curriculums. Our California Department of Education will advocate at the federal level for the full funding of the Individuals with Disability and Education Act. This single reform at the federal level, if the federal government were to just uphold their end of the promise, which was to fund IDEA at 40%, not even 100%, their promise was just 40%. Today, it's at 14.8%. That means that every school district is putting up 85% of the bill for every kid with a disability. At the school district where I'm board president of, 1 out of every 6 students has an IEP. That means that a significant percentage of our general fund is going to serve the needs of kids with disabilities. That in of itself is not the problem. The problem is that we're not adequately funded to do so. And when that happens, all students suffer. The next topic is, we believe, yes, that public universities, colleges, and technical schools must be free. Prop 15, I think that a lot of people have really focused on like the failures of this pandemic, which there have been many, and kind of like the things that this pandemic has highlighted, right, or emboldened, and many people are focusing on that. But the first failure of the current administration of both Governor Newsom and Superintendent Thurmond was the failure to pass Proposition 15, Schools and Communities First, into 2020 election. Why did that happen? Well, to summarize it in one sentence, you cannot count on the Democratic Party to organize poor people to vote in favor of a proposition that's going to tax their funders. It's ludicrous. It's a contradiction, right? And so we believe that when the working class and the poor vote against their self-interest, like they did with Proposition 15, it is because there was not the proper mechanisms in place in order to truly organize and mobilize that community to do so. Therefore, the failure of Proposition 15, in essence, we believe, should be seen as a clear as what the state actually wanted the outcome to be. Let's be just frank and honest about that. I don't believe that the state actually wanted Prop 15 to pass. We need to make sure that the split roll tax becomes a thing, and that these huge corporations, these multi-billion-dollar corporations, truly are putting up their fair share. And then lastly, Through the power of the people, we will build a conscientious education system, an education system like Bell Hooks stated, rest in power, by the way, Bell Hooks, where education is the practice of freedom. And we believe what that means in essence is that education, a truly liberatory education praxis, cannot just focus on what is happening within the confines of the classroom. To look out for the well-being of your students, you need to also pay attention and advocate and fight for what is happening outside of the confines of the classroom and the school. That's why we're pushing for reparations. That's why we believe in abolishing ICE. That's why we believe that housing is a human right. That's why we believe that Medicare for all is a human right. And just on that point on Medicare for all, I think that's another glaring example and contradiction of how the Democratic Party actually does not want to do what is right for the working class and for the working people. If Medicare would have passed the CalCare Act, AB 1400, I believe it was, if CalCare would have passed, what that would have meant what is a $20 million savings for the school district where I'm a board president of. For a district like LA, it's 5 or 7-fold of that savings. That CalCare pass, that bill, if it would have passed, it would have actually meant the real largest investment in public education in recent history. And so I believe it's straight blasphemous that Superintendent Thurmond was not advocating for CalCare and was not doing what is best for public education and what is best for our families, which is to look out for their best interests. And so let me get to charter schools. There are many charter school parents that are supporting this campaign. Why is that? They know, they've seen me, they've heard me, they've heard me say many times that I'm against charter schools, and yet they are supporting this campaign. There are many people within the charter school community, within the charter school world, who simply want what's best for their children. Period. Full stop. That is what they want. What is best for their children. And this is especially true in many Black communities throughout California. They have seen what we call the traditional public school has done to their kids. And I will never judge a family for doing what they feel is right for their kid, especially when our public schools create the trauma that they do. I, as superintendent of public instruction, you know what I believe is the best way to combat charter schools? Yes, policy is important, right? All the different bills that have passed in the past 10 years or so in order to have a check, if you will, on charter schools, those things are important in of themselves. But what is actually more important? What's more important is creating a public education system that gives a damn about our kids. What's the best campaign against charter schools is a campaign that actually fully funds public education. The best campaign against charter schools is to forgive Oakland Unified School District's debt. Because what's going to happen if those 12 schools in Oakland close down? Either developers are going to come in or charter schools are going to come in. And I would never judge a parent for taking their kid to their local charter school and instead of putting them on a bus and having them drive several miles away from home just to go to a public school. And so really, we need to be really questioning what the so-called people that are advocating for public education, we need to be questioning if they actually are advocating for public education. Because all of Oakland school board members, all of them, they're all Democrats. They all supposedly are against charter schools, but the policies and the politics that the majority of them, not all of them, right? But the majority of them are pushing, even though they're not saying it outwardly, is pro-charter school policies. And so for us, we are going to be, our campaign welcomes the criticisms of and the critiques of charter school families and parents into our campaign. We want to integrate them into our campaign so that we can collectively fight for a public education system that actually is worth attending. Because although the vast majority, and upwards to 90% or plus of charter schools are unquestionably devastating for public schools, there are some, they are exceptions, they are not the rule, but there are some charter schools in the state.
Marco, can you wrap it up or?
I'll do that right now. That actually do good work for their kids and for their communities. Work that many times I am envious of, that we are limited of doing in our public schools. So the best way to combat charter schools is to fight for a fully funded, liberatory public education system where teachers and public and students are the ones in power. And we would do that methodically. We would do that through a conscientious, politically principled process. And we hope that the three collectives that are on this call today are part of that process with us. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's all a plug. Thank you, Marco. I mean, so thanks to everyone for participating in this Suds, Snacks, and Socialism Forum. These forums take place usually on the first Saturday of most months. Our next forum will be the first Saturday in March, which I believe is March 5th. And in honor of International Women's Day, which will be March 8th, we will have 3 women who are running for statewide office on the, Laura, tell me the name of the slate again.
Green Party
on the left unity slate, and Laura Wells is here. She's one of those candidates. You can sign up to get forum announcements by requesting to do so in the chat or by emailing us at the address, which I hope is being posted in the chat. It is info@sudssnackssocialism.org. Thank you everyone for coming. And thank you, Marco, for joining us today. And I'm going to see you again tomorrow. I hope the rest of us will, and bring your friends and write some checks or click on the link. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. I'm at the school board meeting on the 8th.